G'day everybody and welcome to the ScaleUps Podcast. This is probably the first time you've ever listened to me, and so I thought it might be helpful for you to have a little 10-minute intro to give you an idea about my background and the genesis of the podcast, what it is we're trying to achieve, what I don't want the podcast to become and what it's not going to be, and finally a bit of a sneak peek into the first 10 or 20 episodes. Let's get going. So why am I the one bringing you this podcast? Well, over the last 10 years, I've been a professional CEO, a growth driver, a director, an advisor, and I've been fortunate enough to spend quite a lot of time doing mergers and acquisitions, and I've looked at over 200 deals during that period. I also had an opportunity to acquire or start or integrate 7 or 8 brands during that period, and that gave me a lot of learnings and a lot of insight. But what I ended up doing in the last 4 years was actually mentoring founders or CEOs or general managers on their scaling strategies. And this very fortunate opportunity to look at all these conversations from the leader's perspective and to see their businesses from the outside really illuminated a few things, but it also troubled me in a few ways. And it troubled me for 2 reasons. What I could see was there were 2 issues that seemed to be robbing the world of value. The first issue is that businesses fail to scale. And what I mean by that is I see businesses all the time that have amazing products and services and really create a lot of value for people through those products and services. But what happens is they get outcompeted, outbusinessed, if that was a verb. They get outcompeted by their competitors who might actually have inferior product or service options. And why is that a problem? It's a problem because the customers get robbed of potential value. They end up taking inferior products or services, so that value is not actually being created in the world. And the founders find it frustrating. I found it so frustrating. And in addition, the founder then tends to fail to achieve their personal potential as well as their business's potential, and often therefore don't achieve their own dreams. And I just think that's a real shame. And whilst scaling isn't easy, there are a lot of things, it is a well-trodden path, and there are a lot of things that work, and there are a lot of things that are worth avoiding as well. And when you're a first-time founder and you haven't done it before, you don't know what those things are. You don't know what you don't know. So one of my philosophies is if you actually have the best product or service in the market, it's incumbent upon you to scale. Like, it's actually your obligation, because if you don't, to the extent that you don't, to that extent, customers end up with value not being created in the world. They get robbed of that future value. Second issue is failing while scaling. And what I mean by that is sometimes people fail on the way up. It actually happens amazingly frequently, more frequently than you would realize. Sometimes that's a founder who stagnates because the business stagnates because the founder's fallen out of love with the business. They've lost the energy, they've lost the mojo, they've lost the interest, and it slowly sort of dies a death of 1,000 cuts because they just fundamentally fall out of love with the business. It might be a burnout issue. Yeah, sometimes founders don't build team fast enough around them or delegate in the right way, and they end up doing everything. And as a result of the personal consequences on their families, on their health, they end up actually burning out and not being able to continue or maintain that growth rate. Sometimes partnerships fall apart, and there's lots of business partnerships that have worked incredibly well, and there's lots that have gone really poorly, and there are some lessons that can be learned through those experiences. And then finally, some companies end up in administration or end up getting liquidated. Why? Because they've run out of money. Sometimes they've run out of money because they're actually growing too quickly and they don't understand their cash conversion cycle. Things happen too fast, they don't have financing available, and they fall over. Others end up falling over because they don't actually have enough defensive cash available, or they don't have enough protection, they don't have enough levers. And when things go hard and they end up in a troubled spot, they actually can't sail their way through it. So that's a problem. So I really wanted to bring a mechanism to help first-time founders find out what they don't know, learn what they don't know. So the moments, the decisions, the strategies that successful founders have put in place that actually really help them. Not the ones who've built necessarily unicorns, although they're relevant, but I'm actually more interested in the entrepreneurs who've built their companies to the next stage that's maybe a couple of stages, but not huge numbers of stages beyond where those $2 to $15 million founders are. Why? Because that's relevant. They remember what it's like to be you, to be close, to be in those troubled periods. So I'm going to try to bring tools and frameworks from experts in scaling. I'm going to be looking to bring financing options and exit options, and I'll be bringing on investors and VCs and people who can raise capital. I have all sorts of different perspectives to help inform first-time founders on things that they can do that will help them in their scaling efforts, and things that they can do to avoid failing on the way up. So there will be 4 guest types. There'll be the founders who've already scaled. There will be experts on scaling. There'll be experts on failing, so insolvency practitioners and turnaround guys and restructuring people who see the other side and all the things that go wrong. So they've got instructive lessons. And then finally, and one of the bits that I'm most excited about, and we're not going to do this in the first 20 or 30 episodes, but it will happen. We're going to follow a cohort of strivers. What do I mean by strivers? Those are those first-time founders that are actually on the way up. And we're going to follow them in a sort of warts and all, fly-on-the-wall type experience where we'll interview them maybe 3 or 4 times a year over the course of 3 years, and we'll actually follow along with their journey, the highs, the lows. Some of them will scale, some of them will stall, and some of them might fail. That's part of the game. But actually, we're going to learn together as a community through their experience, which I think will be really instructive. And finally, why am I doing this personally? Well, you know what? This actually, it really fills my bucket. I am a deeply curious person, and I love these conversations with these kinds of people, great conversations with great people that are instructive for others, for the benefit of others. I absolutely love that. I get a huge kick out of it. I love talking to people who've got unique perspectives, deep experience, and where I can draw that learning out. And hopefully that's something that I can bring to you as a community. And I think you'll probably feel that how much I enjoy these podcasts once we get stuck into it. Okay, so now we understand what the podcast is going to be about, what it is. But what isn't it? What's it not going to be about? And there's 2 things that really sum that up. First of all, it's not going to be a sales pitch. Yes, I see private clients. I mentor or chair advisory boards or establish advisory boards for founders that are scaling up. Yes, I still do mergers and acquisitions work. I still do a lot of that in the education space. But this podcast is not about me. It's not about me pitching my services. And yes, I might share some of my experiences as a way of deepening some of the learnings and the opportunities when I'm talking with different guests. But this is not about me. This community is about you. This is about first-time founders scaling up and helping those people get access to information that's going to help them accelerate that path, hopefully avoid some avoidable issues and find things that will help them there get faster so they can create value in the world and fulfill their potential. Second thing is this is not about inspiration. This is all about action. A well-known podcaster in Australia always says, knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it. And it's so true. This whole podcast is about implementation. It's about lessons and actions and learning. So I'm going to encourage people to send in their questions so that we can talk to the community about and handle some of those questions with other founders or other guests, or I can handle those myself. But this is about you taking learnings, you doing stuff with it, and you trialing and testing and implementing. There's limited value in ideas. Let's be real. The value is always in execution. So let's get stuck into that. Okay, so let's get into the guts of it. What are a few of the sneak peeks of the kinds of founders and kind of stories you're likely to hear about? I got a little list here. Let me give you a couple. I interviewed, and you're going to hear from Elise Stoltzdickerson. She is a founder of a biotech company called Eosera. After landing her first big sale, she had to scramble to build 40,000 units of her product in 90 days. She didn't even have a manufacturer or final product packaging yet. Had some unbelievable lessons. Esha Oberoi, who's an Australian founder of Afia Care Services, she started her company at 24, and 13 years later, she's got 350 full-time equivalent staff, and she's making a real and positive impact in the Australian community, particularly around disability and in-home care services. Richard Katzman, who you're going to hear from, who actually inherited the business from his grandfather and then from his father. And so he sort of started his entrepreneurship journey, if you like, when the business was about $5 million in revenue, but he grew it to $500 million in revenue, not overnight, but over 32 years, constant, 16% year-on-year growth for 32 years. Unbelievable. That wasn't about overnight success. That was about strategic partnerships and licensing and innovation. Kelly Broderick from Cleanworks in Australia. You're going to love her. She co-founded her business at 19 with her best friend, Katie. And 20 years later, they've got a business doing almost $20 million. And they got there by really niching down on a really critical customer type and also really understanding their financial management, cash flow and financial planning. And in the last 5 years, they actually tripled their growth rate. Steve Grace from the Nudge Group, who you're going to love. Steve Grace had just finished building a recruitment company from $2 million to $45 million in revenue, and then has built a new business that is essentially recruiting for startups, and he's absolutely disrupting the recruitment model for startups. The list goes on, and you don't need to have heard these names before. This podcast is not about bringing you household brands, household names for founders. This is about bringing you successful, authentic, accessible people who are willing to share their learnings and be humble in the delivery of those in a way that helps you get learnings about things that you can do, learn from their mistakes so you can avoid some things, and fundamentally succeed as a founder. I don't want to give away too much more, but there is also an expert category. That's just a few of our founders. In the expert category, just to give you one little taster there, in the first 10 episodes, we're going to interview Stipe Valletta. And Stipe is the managing director of Chamberlain's law firm. What's fascinating about Stipe is he would have seen now cumulatively hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of insolvencies, partnership blow-ups, disputes, liquidations, all of these incredible sort of travesties, if you like, that he's got learnings from. But that at the same time, he has actually scaled the law firm that he runs from 11 people to 120 people in 4 years, which is unbelievable. And so this is just a small sample. In the subsequent 10 episodes, I'm really getting stuck into turnarounds and capital raising and talking to VCs and really helping to broaden the community. So you're still going to hear from all 4 guest types, not the strivers in the first 20 episodes. Those will come later, but you'll hear from those first 4 guest types over the course of that first 20 episodes. That's enough from me. Hope that gives you a clearer sense of what you're going to be receiving as part of this community. Can't wait to share it with you. I hope you get as much value out of it as I get joy from bringing it to you. And you'll find it easily on Apple Podcast. You'll find it on Spotify. You'll find the full video versions on YouTube. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram. I'm Sean Steele. Welcome to the ScaleUps Podcast community. Can't wait to share the journey with you.